Evening and welcome to tonight's broadcast. We are back again talking about the Sopranos. Okay, we've been doing a watch, we've been going through, we've been going season by season, doing a sort of a recap as we revisit the show. I'm revisiting the show for the first time in over a decade. It's incredible to rewatch it now, and I'll say number one, hands down, the greatest observation thus far is that first of all, I didn't realize how dry, it's a very comedic show, and I'm like blown away at how much it aligns with shows like Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm in its sort of like situational, I don't know, it's situational. I don't want to call it comedy per se, but it's like everything's a situation, let's put it that way. And tonight I'm actually joined by a special guest co-host. He is a dear friend who loves The Sopranos. He's watched The Sopranos way more times than I've ever seen The Sopranos. And, he wanted to jump into the conversation. This is one of his favorite seasons. So he's joining me. So it's going to be a little bit different than what we've done previously. And the last thing I will say is we are currently running our contest. So we're going to ask a Sopranos themed trivia question at the end, and you'll send your email to FrumessMAIL@gmail.com. And if you were the first person to answer correctly, you will win a free shirt. Let me show you the rules and stipulations in our very quick little video. I'm going to be doing a live show every single day. I'm going to be giving away a t-shirt. At the end of every episode, I will ask my trivia question. You will send your answer to FrumessMAIL@gmail.com, and the first person to answer correctly will be the winner. You give me your name, your address, and your t-shirt size. If you are outside of the continental United States, you will have to cover shipping and handling. Join us night after night where I will be doing t-shirt giveaways. Who doesn't like a free t-shirt? I'm not going to go easy on any of you. I'm going to ask really hard questions. So be prepared. All right. So now you know what the deal is. Let me bring out my guest. Some call him Jeremy. Some call him Spice Handler. Some call him Spice. He's called himself Spicy, but I think it's more appropriate to consider him Spicy Walnuts for tonight's show. So without further ado, let me bring him out from behind the digital green room that we have back there. Oh, hey, Maron.
Maron. All right.
Maron.
Hi.
Welcome to tonight's show.
Thank you.
Spicy. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you.
You've been kind of getting an earful from me on in the real world as I talk about where I'm at and what I'm watching with The Sopranos.
Okay, so yeah, let me give you a brief history on how I got into the show.
Okay,
right?
Go ahead. Sure.
I remember, so just for context, because you and I are almost precisely the same age. We grew up at a
we
time,
are the same age. We're the same age. I'm a month older than you.
And you know who else is the same age as us?
AJ?
Anthony Jr. Anthony Soprano.
I didn't realize that.
AJ is the same age as us. So in watching this show, I always have a lot of relation to like what he's wearing, like what fads we're in and stuff. You know what I mean? When he's in 8th grade, I was in 8th grade. I think the show started probably when we were in 7th grade, 7th or 8th.
Started in 99.
Right? Yeah.
So we were in 7th grade.
January of 99. I know we graduated 8th grade in June of 2000, right? So
yes.
we were in 7th grade. And I remember people, I didn't have HBO, but I remember some people who had it and they were talking about it. And, for example, like when, the big reveal of like what happens at the end of season 2, I can talk about
that. I remember that people talked about.
I remember people couldn't believe that they had killed Big Pussy.
Right.
Huge. They couldn't believe it. And it was a big deal. Reveal. Sort of maybe akin to, what happened with
Red Wedding.
Ned Stark or the Red Wedding. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So I remember that, but I never really watched it. And I remember not really understanding like what the deal was with it because it came out more or less around the same time as Analyze This,
Right.
if I'm not mistaken.
Very
and kind
close.
of like how
that was 98. I think that was 98.
Yeah, kind of like how Ants and A Bug Life came around the same
Right.
time. And Paul Blart and Observe and Report came around the same
or
time.
Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Exactly. So I remember thinking that the show was more, I mean, it is comedic, you know, and you mentioned that, and it's a lot of dark comedy. And I mean, it's got some of the best one-liners, some of the best jokes in it, some
Evening
of the funniest moments in TV. But it's not a comedy in the same way as, like, you know, Robert De Niro and Billy Crystal doing a mob and a therapist, because, you know, they both have a mobster in therapy. So I didn't really understand how dark of a show it was or how serious of a show it was, despite its comedic overtones, until later when I started watching it. And when I actually started watching it was during the final season. I was hanging out with one of those kids who we were friends with in middle school, who I had reconnected with, and he was one of these rich kids who had HBO, and he had this ritual of, you know, every Sunday. Did I just go out?
No, you're fine.
Okay,
I'm just saying hello to our friend Dan.
Oh, okay. No, my screensaver did come on, so I think I have to.
You plug in your computer probably.
Yeah. So what happened was, I reconnected with him and I was spending a lot of time over at his place. And every Sunday he would watch The Sopranos, and it was the final season. And I'd be watching it, and I didn't have a clue. You know what I mean? I knew Paulie Walnuts and Christopher were characters because I had seen their faces on T-shirts, but I had no idea who they were in relation to Tony. I had no idea what was going on. And I think there was actually one episode from this season, from the 5th season, that I had watched completely out of context. I didn't know what was going on. I just remember Tony and Johnny Sack sitting in a limo, and Johnny's kind of giving Tony the third degree and sort of interrogating him. And Steve Buscemi's standing there in the graveyard, kind of like looking over his shoulder. And I just remember that image and having no idea what was going on. But I watched the last season, and I decided, okay, I need to watch this show. So this is the days of, right? This is 2007. So these are the days of Netflix. There was no real streaming. I think they had maybe just launched their streaming platform, but it was very bare bones. There wasn't much you could get. And Netflix was a DVD rental service. And I was renting the Sopranos DVDs 3 at a time with my trial membership, right? And trying to binge them as fast as possible. And I was renting them 3 at a time, and I was binging them. And I was also working at the world famous Italian Village in Scarsdale, New York at the time. And so on my days off, I'd be watching this show, and they'd be eating all this great Italian food. They'd be having their Sunday dinners, you know, and I'd be like, you know, that sounds good. I'm going to order that, you know, and I just got really into it, really enjoyed it. I must admit, a lot of the mob stuff was over my head. A lot of the jargon, I didn't really know what they were talking about. But I started, I watched it a bunch. And eventually.
How many times would you say you've seen it?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I think I've watched it through and through. I mean, there's certain seasons I've watched through and through more times than others. The 3rd and the 5th.
That's really bizarre that you would do that.
Well, because I love the 3rd season, and sorry for being off camera. I'm plugging in the laptop now. So the 3rd season and the 5th season are my favorite. I find the 1st season a bit difficult to get through, even though there's great episodes on there. But let me just explain what I used to do. Is my younger brother discovered some channel. This is in like 2008 or 2009, that just played every episode in continuity on a loop in perpetuity. And there was a little chat. There was a chat screen going down there too. And so what I would do is I'd get home from the bar or wherever, and I would turn that on, and whatever episode was on, I would just let it play, and I'd like go to sleep like that. And so I'd get home and be like, oh, it's episode 6, you know, season 3 or whatever, and just watch it like that and have it on sort of as background noise quite a bit. As far as watching it through with people, I've done that probably 3 or 4 times. I recently did a watch of episode, I think like season 3 through the end recently.
So basically what you're trying to say is that you've seen the show a lot, and season 5 is one of your favorites, and we're about to dive in right now and talk about it. And the thing about season 4 is that it crescendos with this thing that's sort of been brewing for the entirety of the show. For 4 seasons, we have watched Tony just endlessly cheat on Carm, just endlessly cheat on her, and it all comes to a head, and they have a big blowout, and we discussed that on the last episode. And that brings us into season 5, where Carm and Tony are separated. They are not living together anymore, and Tony has now somehow found himself living in the Livia house, in his parents' house, which was vacant. Right, his childhood home. You have Janice and Bobby have gotten married, and we have that very touching, wonderful. I was telling you about it off camera, just how much I love Karen's last Ziti is one of the great moments of character development in The Sopranos for me. I love that so much. Even though Bobby's kind of a secondary character, it's just such a wonderful writer's touch to
Bobby's
change.
A great character, and his loyalty to Junior is amazing. And so I mean, obviously a lot has transpired between 4 and 5, right? Because they're married, and I think maybe they have that's later.
No, that happens in 6.
In 6, that's right. Yeah.
But she's the stepmom now.
She's the stepmom, and she's got a weird relationship with those kids. Anyway, I mean, season 5 opens up with that monologue. You know what I'm talking about? It's like over music. I can't remember the details of who it is who's reading it, but it's anyway, I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm talking about. But I tried to pull it up. You have Christopher and Polly. They're retelling the Pine Barrens ordeal, which is fun because we get to hear it from their point of view, as they would want to tell it to friends and look like all bad, big and bad. And it that sort of blossoms into a new kind of resentment between Chris and Paulie over paying for dinner. Yeah, Chris and Paulie. I mean, listen, Paulie, one of his, I think, primary traits is that he's a cheapskate. And at the end of the day, like, if it means a couple dollars for him, he will kill you, he'll rob you. It doesn't matter like who you are. He doesn't care. He's all about saving $1. He's known for disappearing when the check comes out, going to the bathroom. That's one of his defining characteristics. And him and Chris have a difficult relationship,
tumultuous relationship
from the rip. Particularly like in season 3, is it when Chris gets his wings?
When he becomes a made guy, Paulie starts doing the search and seizures thing. So this has been an ongoing sort of thing, and it's sort of opened back up because Chris is complaining that he has to pay for dinner all the time. Tony says, "Hey, I had to pay for dinner too, Christopher."
Yeah, and the whole thing too is, what happened in the Pine Barrens there was entirely Paulie's fault.
Yeah,
and Chrissy kind of calls him out on that. If you hadn't, broken the universal remote, and then the whole thing was kind of his idea, and Paulie doesn't like to be made to look like a fool, and
he doesn't like to take responsibility for his faults.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. So all right, so season 5, right? Episode 1, it opens with that monologue, and it's sort of just almost like a montage. It's showing sort of where everyone's at. Finn and Meadow are living together.
I think you're talking about season 6.
Is that 6? Am I tripping?
That's 6. Yeah, oof. That's what that is. That I know what monologue you're talking about. That you're talking about the beginning of season 6. No, season 5 opens. That was one thing between Chris and Paulie. Another thing that's happening in the first. This is the first episode. we get 4 people get released from prison.
Yes. Yes.
That are 3 of them are older than Tony.
Mhm.
You have Feech, who is just
Feech Lamana, played by the great Robert Loggia, also the grandpa from Over the Top. One of my favorite movies.
And he plays the mobster in Innocent Blood. He's in a lot of stuff. He's
Independence
a great
Day.
actor. Yeah, great actor. Then you also have Phil Leotardo, Frank Vincent of Scorsese mobster fame, and he is a capo underneath the New York family for Carmine and Johnny Sack, overboss and underboss.
Yes.
Then you got Tony B. So there's another Tony, and this is played by Steve Buscemi, and he's coming out, and he's of all the guys, he's the guy who he kind of seems like he's reformed, and he wants to become a massage therapist, and he doesn't. And I thought he was a made guy. He's not a made guy. He is not a made guy. He was, when he got pinched for the thing that Tony didn't get pinched for, they hadn't opened the book for those guys yet. So he comes out of the prison, but he's done. I mean, he might as well be in the mob. He's an associate in the same way that I guess maybe Christopher was. And I'm trying to think, who's the 4th guy that gets out of prison? There's one more, and I think he gets popped.
Is it Angelo? Maybe it's someone who.
It's Angelo. But I'm trying to put
close with in there.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Angelo was super close with Tony B. That's what happened. Right now, I remember. Yep. Yes, because now I'm in season 6, and all of a sudden, season 5 is getting pushed down.
Man, why am I? Can you see me right now?
Yeah. You're good.
Okay, that's good because I'm looking at my screensaver, my lock screen. So good to know that when that happens, you can
just shake your mouse and shake your little mouse and you'll be okay. The season, so there'd been a lot of sort of friction with not just Johnny Sack, less with Johnny Sack. Johnny Sack and Tony were very friendly pretty much throughout this entire show. And things started to get a little tense,
with the Ralph situation in 4.
Well, also with Carmine. Carmine doesn't help matters either. The boss,
Carmine Senior,
yeah, Carmine Senior. He doesn't help things either. There's a lot of things that the thing about when Johnny Sack and Tony, when there's no outside influence, those guys get along thick as thieves. But the moment that there's some outside thing that happens, they always end up butting heads. There's always friction between Tony and Johnny Sack. And that whole dynamic gets shifted because Carmine has a stroke. He has a stroke.
Too much gherkins.
Right. He has a stroke and he dies. And what's ironic,
smell that? Burning hair.
Right. Burning hair, which is a red flag if you're having a stroke. Now, this is kind of ironic because last season, Johnny Sack wanted Carmine clipped and Tony refused to do it. And now here they are with this happening. This also creates a power vacuum because little Carmine, who's down in Florida, remember, he's the guy who's helping Tony deal with big Carmine. Suddenly him and Johnny Sack are going at it for who's going to be boss. And Tony, he's suggesting, hey, why don't you have a trifecta of bosses? And Johnny Sack's like, get the fuck out of here. There's a whole thing going on with a large black bear too. And this is sort of a metaphor, I suppose, for Tony needing to come back and protect his household. But she doesn't want anything to fucking do with him. She's like, Tony, get out of here. She doesn't want anything to do with him. She's done with Tony. But he still wants to make sure that the family is protected. Tony's pissed about Furio. Furio disappears. Tony has guys looking for him. So there's that whole thing. Tony also feels the urge to see Dr. Melfi again, and he starts reaching out to her, and he's trying to date her again. And
he's trying to date her. And the letter he writes to her is the most cringe thing.
Yeah.
And the punctuation and the grammar is atrocious.
Any of that stuff with her, with Melfi, it always makes me cringe.
It's very cringe, but I think it's also a window into just how uneducated he really is, and also just how delusional he is, because he kind of like blames her for everything, and like has like a resentment against her.
I think
for,
that's no. I think that's that's how he tries to make sense. I think deep down inside, here's what it is. When he deep down inside, he probably knows it comes from when things don't go his way, and he's used to getting his way, being the boss, being the skip. I mean, Tony Soprano always gets his way, and this is the.
You said that because, you know, in Cold Cuts, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, you know, when Janice is explaining to him, or is it Janice, or is he talking about it with Melfi? And, you know, she's saying, you know, it's about like accepting that things are the way they are and not blowing up. And then his response is, well, then how do you get people to do what you want them to do? You know what I mean? Because in his world, that's the way he lives his life. He gets people to do what he wants to do through intimidation, through violence, if necessary, through, you know, any number of ways.
It's the, you know what it is? And I think you'll appreciate this analogy. It's the Prince analogy. Prince very famously was an eccentric guy who had many helpers at beck and call. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, this is not my story. This is Kevin Smith's story, because Kevin Smith made a documentary for Prince that was never released. And he would say, Prince, he would say, use this as an example. If Prince wanted a camel at 3 o'clock in the morning, he would say, I need a camel at 3 o'clock in the morning, and not in an obnoxious way, just in the way of like, I'm Prince, and I literally moved the earth to like become this incredibly famous, rich rock star. So anything's possible to me. And I have the resources to make these things happen. So it's like, it comes from like an innocent place. It's not like trying to be difficult. It's just the way that you view the world based on how you live in the world. And Tony is to a similar example. Tony, the world bends for Tony and every which way. So now Melfi, Tony is used to bagging any chick he wants. And now, you know, the one chick that he wants,
he can't have her. He can't have her. And it's so interesting too, because just to go back to the bear, you know, Anthony Jr. is like acting like he's Mr. Tough Guy, you know, and she wants him to take out the garbage, take out the garbage, mommy. And then the next thing you hear, mommy. And he's out there, and he's like, basically,
I hate AJ so much.
He's horrible.
Just the worst.
He really is the worst, like through and through. And he's just got this like blank stare. I'm not going to just pan AJ right now, but you know, to get back to
he's trying to date Melfi.
He's trying to date Melfi. He's trying to date Melfi, and she's just not having it. And she's talking about it with you know, her doctor, Elliot Kupferberg, who's played by the late great Peter Bogdanovich.
Such a Jew. In the I don't think he's a Jew in real life, but in the show he's such.
I don't know, but do you know about him?
He's a filmmaker. He's a director.
He's like a famous, you know, big time important guy. I don't remember all the details, but I know that like Michael Imperioli really like sang his praises quite a bit. So I want to talk about. So since we're on the bear thing, right? You know, it gives Tony an opportunity to have eyes in the house, right? You know, so he sends like Benny there, right? And it gives him an opportunity to sort of know what's going on. And there's this weird sexual thing, not sexual, but there's this weird tension with the park ranger guy, the animal control guy, because he can kind of see that Carmela is attracted to him, and they exchange a look.
Oh, I never picked up on that.
Yeah, really. and Tony's like looking at him and looking at her. And then after he leaves, he's like, Tony says something about like, oh, hey, Ranger Rick over there, he's a little light in the loafers or something. Because
that's what he was referring to.
Yeah, because Tony's way of
it feels threatened.
You know, threatened is to basically like put down the guy's masculinity or whatever. You know, because that's the way it works in Tony's world. But you know, I also want to talk about.
Let's hold on. Wait. Let's keep it in order, just because, or let me
Yeah,
guide
that's
us
why I
in
want
the
to get
order of
back
the
to.
thing.
I want to get back to the release of these old timers, right? And
Okay.
this is something that you sort of see throughout The Sopranos. Is first of all, when these guys were locked up, Tony was a little shit, basically. You know what I mean? He made his name for himself by robbing Feach
Right.
Lamana's card game.
Yeah,
Feach
we find out that Feach is the guy whose card game he robbed.
Yes, exactly. And Feach is a character we've heard of. Exactly. Feach is a character we've heard of since earlier. And you know, they knocked off Feach's card game, and that's sort of how him and Jackie made names for themselves. And so, you know, Feach comes out, and I think when these guys were arrested, I don't think the RICO statutes were like they were, and they were arrested in, I think, the 70s, maybe the early 80s. And so the mob was, I mean, the world was different, right? The world was a different place. The mob was a different place. Technology was totally different. And I think in those days, you didn't have to be maybe quite as careful in terms of how you made your money, you know, like, and so they come out to this totally different world, and they're used to being a little bit more cutthroat, a little less careful. They don't have to tiptoe quite as much back in those days. And the other thing is, when they were arrested, they did the stand-up thing. The thing is that is expected of you when you're in the mob, and that is to keep your mouth shut and do your time. Because
so they have a sense of entitlement.
They have a sense of entitlement. They did what was expected of them, and then they come back and they're, I wouldn't say that they're shit on, but they are. No one wants to deal with them because they're old news. They're these old guys that kind of can't.
No, I don't think it's that. I think that just it was the same thing with Richie April. It's a handful to deal with guys when they get out, because at the end of the day, they want to do this thing. They want to pretend like they're men of honor who honor you. You honor someone who keeps their mouth shut. You honor this, but then at the end of the day, it's like, oh, this is a pain in my ass. I don't feel like paying for this guy.
Yeah,
I don't feel like dealing with this guy.
This fucking old fuck who doesn't know how things are now, who keeps talking about sort of the old days, and this is how it was in my day,
and treating Tony like he's a little kid,
and treating Tony like he's a little kid. And so it just doesn't fly. And it's like you said, it happened with Richie April when he got out, and it's kind of a recurring thing. And yeah, I mean, you know,
our king says Feach calling seatbelts shoulder straps always made me laugh. There's a couple of things like that. Like when Paulie in season 6, he says he's talking to his ma about getting her a flat screen TV. When he finds out that she's not his mom, he says, I got you that flat screen TV for $2,000 from Sharper's Image. He calls it Sharper's Image.
You know, I don't recall that, but this last time that I watched, I noticed that like the CRTs were still what everyone had. You look in every bar they're in, every sports bar, they're all CRT TVs. It's not until really season 6
you really notice the technology. You notice it in the flip phones. You notice it in, there's like little things. Otherwise, you'd think that it was contemporary.
Yeah.
Until you see the laptops, until you see these little things.
That TV, that's, you know, they have it on the pillar. They have like that really tacky, like
yes, they do in their bedroom.
And they have the TV. And it's just crazy how CRTs kind of like disappeared, how quickly they disappeared.
I mean, technology. I mean, that's what happens when the technology changes. But listen, so in episode 2, you know, little Carmine is starting to, so he's beefing with Johnny Sack. There's a couple of informants there's this guy with the hat, and he's wearing a wire in his hat, and I forgot what he did.
I think the guy with the hat you're talking about is that
the baseball hat with the hair plugs.
The baseball hat with the hair plugs. That's the construction guy.
Oh, right. That's the construction guy. And then there's also the capo Ray. And
Ray Barretto,
Ray Curto.
Ray Curto.
And he
Ray
is.
Where did I get that name from?
You know what's funny is they're on to the construction guy with the hat, but they're not on to Ray. They don't know that Ray
catch on to Ray. I don't know.
They don't. He dies in the FBI car. He just drops dead, and nobody's all the wiser.
You know what's interesting about him is he is like the most willing snitch out there. I feel like
He's very two-faced.
everyone else feels kind of conflicted about it, and they feel like they're cornered. He's like, oh, do you want me to get the funeral on tape? Like, he's kind of like the FBI's little lapdog, and
it's true. And meanwhile, you have Adriana, who is just like, I gotta tell you, and we'll talk about we'll talk about what happens to Adriana at the end of the season. You know, I'm so torn. I mean, I'm so sad for Adriana, because at the end of the day, of all the people on the show, you know, I guess Adriana's probably at the Carm level, because, like, here's the thing. Carm is a good person. She has a good heart, but at the end of the day, she knows who her husband is and what he does and how she gets her money. And she turns a blind eye to it while trying to, you know, be religiously, you know, exude religious piety. And Adriana's kind of in the same boat. Adriana's a good person mostly, but at the same time, she knows what Chris does. She knows that Chris kills people. She knows that she wants to marry a killer. And, you know, she's caught up, you know, and it doesn't help the fact that she literally is an April. You know, she comes from her uncles were I mean, they were the fucking, well, her uncle was the fucking boss of all bosses at one point.
And she is just falling apart in this season.
Big time.
Her
big
health
time.
is going, her
the
nerves.
IBS.
Yeah, it's just
it's so sad to watch.
The guilt is eating her from the inside out.
Right.
You know?
And they have a movie night, and this happens a little bit later in the episode. Season, where she's like trying to like push herself to come clean about what's going on, and she can't do it. And then also, you know, Angie.
God, what do you think would have happened if she had, because she was this close. She was this close. What do you think would have happened if she had said that? I mean, they all would have told their husband. I mean, you know,
she would have died. She would have died. It's the same thing as like what I'm watching.
I know she would have died, but how do you think that would have happened? Do you think like Carm would have told Tony? Or like what would have been the mechanism?
Actually, do you know who I think it would have been? Just in the way that the Sopranos write.
Ro?
I think it would have been Janice. Of all,
was she there? She was there with them?
Yes, she was.
Oh,
and
it would have totally been Janice.
And here's why it would be Janice. Because Janice, who so desperately wants to break away from being like, you know, an Italian mobster's daughter, you know, finds herself married to an Italian mobster with kids. And, you know, like at the end of the day, she would probably be the one. This is how it would go down. If I was writing The Sopranos, she would be the one that's defending Adriana from everybody else in the room and trying to comfort her. Well, everything's cool. And then something, Janice would have an epiphany of some kind off screen or in just her day-to-day life. There'd be some epiphany that connects to what happens if Adriana is not dealt with. And then she would go to Tony. She'd be the one to go to Tony, maybe even trying to score points. And it would have happened anyway. So,
you know, I got to tell you something about Janice. I saw a meme one time that was like, you know, the game Fuck, Marry, Kill.
Yeah.
Like Janice really did fuck, marry, kill with fucking Richie, Ralphie, and Bobby, right?
She sure did.
She played
that
game.
She fucked, married, killed them. And she fucked Ralphie. That's for
she fucked Ralphie, she killed Richie, and she married Bobby.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that. That's a great little thing. So in any case, she's like coming apart at the seams. You know, soon she's going to be married to Christopher. They're going through the motions. She also knows, like, Angie, who was Big Pussy's widow, she was ousted from the group because they all found out that Pussy was an informant. Yes. You know, so it's like she's terrified. She's absolutely terrified, and she just doesn't know what the hell she's going to do. We just learned more about Tony, what Tony B means to Tony Soprano, and how important that relationship is, and how it's also this great source of guilt because of, basically, in a nutshell, they were both supposed to do a job 17 years ago. Tony B went on the job. Tony Soprano didn't. He said he was jumped by, he used some racist words to describe how he was jumped, and that he got a big gash on the head. Plot twist, turns out to be one of his panic attacks.
Yeah, and I love the way that they really took their time in the season
Revealing it,
to
yeah.
reveal that information.
So true.
You know what I mean? It wasn't what do you call it? Like ham and fisted or whatever. Like they like it wasn't heavy handed. They like let that come out. I think he's almost in tears when he's telling Melfi about that, you know?
Yeah, no, he does. It's a big moment. I was almost kind of jealous of I know what it is to reveal secrets like that, and the catharsis that you feel when you finally get stuff out like that. It feels like a great weight is lifted off your shoulders, you know.
And so, I gotta call it out that like that's such a common thing in this show is that these mobsters, well, not just that, but just like these mobsters have this superiority thing because they're white, right? And they blame so much stuff. It's, it was a bunch of black guys, or it was a bunch of Puerto Rican guys, and like every time it's them. But like they have this like scapegoat relationship with black and brown people that they feel like they're superior. But like, yeah, I mean, you see it all the time in that show. It's like,
right. These are mobsters who particularly these mobster guys who particularly not necessarily Italian, but just
no. I'm saying these guys, these particular guys,
these particular guys. Now, and something that I did previously explained here on the channel, and it's so true. You are a Jew, as am I, and one of my observations while watching the show and just in general is that much like Ashkenazi Jews, Italians and Sicilians we're white until we're in a room with other white people, and then we're a minority of some kind. We are different because we are other. We are off-white. And I feel like Italians have that same thing in common, in that we are kindred spirits in that kind of way. To an extent.
Yeah, I think a lot of immigrant groups,
you see it in the show. You see it in the show too.
I think the Irish too,
sure.
in the Bronx in the old days and stuff like that. You know, it's just, history. But so what do we got? We got Tony B, and so we got their very complex relationship that we don't really know much about at first. And we got some interesting little details about Tony B. He's got the twins. Right.
Explain that. Can you explain? I was kind of, I completely forgot that detail. How did that happen?
I think they smuggled his jizz out of jail.
Yes. Tony smuggled his jism out of jail because he met his wife through one of those classified ads. And
some wild story. And those kids,
so he had twins.
He's like in the Navy. I told you I was in the Navy when that happened or something.
Right.
And,
the two kids, Jason and something else. So they're both, the thing is, Tony wants to give Tony. Here's the thing about Tony B. He's like, hey, I'm going to just be a civilian. I want to be a massage therapist. I find the work to be very rewarding. He studies hard. He gets a straight job. He's working for Mr. Kim and the laundry service, and he's studying, and he's got to prepare for these exams. There's a little bit of humor with him doing flashcards. Here's this mobster adjacent with his flashcards trying to figure out how to do stuff. And meanwhile,
Tony doesn't like it. Tony doesn't like when
Tony wants him to be.
He's giving everyone massages in the back of.
He gives Paulie a massage.
The back of Satriel's or the back of the Bing.
Yeah, back of the Bing.
Tony's just like, what is like?
What are you doing? You give him massages back here?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, at the same time, Tony wants to bring in his cousin, maybe partially out of guilt too. He wants to bring him into the fold. It's like, you did your time. Now let's make you a made guy. But Tony B is attempting. But the thing about Tony B is he likes the lifestyle too much. And slowly but surely, the old adage that we know well goes, if you hang around a barber shop for a while, eventually you will get your hair cut.
Well, there's that, but it's also, I mean, he wants him to get up and running. I think it's absolutely because of the guilt. And then I think a lot of that is tied up in his daughter, right? His daughter.
He has an older daughter,
with Meadow, and I think she maybe lived with them for a little while.
She did live with them for a little while.
She's, I mean, there's a lot of guilt tied up in it, and you know, like Tony sees how
not
good
really
his
though.
daughters-
He's kind of, you know, I kind of feel like he's kind of fronting a little bit, Tony B, because he's like, you know, he doesn't really make that much of a concerted effort to look for his daughter when he gets out. He's just like, she's missing. It's kind of like Harpo. It's kind of like Janice and Harpo, you know? It's the same shit. Like, here she is married.
I wonder what's French Canadian for I grew up without a mother.
Right. We're going to get to that. Cole, we have to talk. We're going to talk about cold cuts in depth, but I
just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
Right?
What?
They did a Sopranos prequel. And
don't talk. I haven't seen it yet.
Don't
talk about it.
I just want to say that they did it wrong, because the real Sopranos prequel that the people want to see is Janice living in Seattle as Parvati, being the belle of the ball and everyone's friend, and like Janice in Seattle in the 70s
when she got her Rolling Stones logo tattoo.
That's what we want to see.
Of course.
So David Chase, if you're watching, we want to see Janice in Seattle in the 70s.
So then we have this whole business with the gardener. Feach starts to really rub elbows the wrong way with everybody in the crew. It starts with this gardener situation. He sees a gardener. Yeah, Salvitro. He beats the shit out of this gardener guy. Says that
Salvitro is a friend of, I think, like Paulie's mom or something like that.
Paulie's aunt.
Paulie's aunt. He's sort of a neighborhood guy. He's not connected, but he's, you know,
he is connected, but he's not associate.
He's not connected. I mean, he's just
what's the difference between what's the difference between being connected and just being? Is Artie connected?
Artie is not connected.
So what is connected? Is connected the same as being an associate?
I don't know the exact terminology. You'd have to ask.
I wish we had Robbie. We need Robbie Bloodshed here. He would be able to.
But you know, you have like the
the
difference between a friend of ours and a friend of mine, right? So a friend of mine is like Brendan Fallone, right? Brendan Fallone from season 1, Christopher's friend who dies in like, I think the pilot.
Right. He gets whacked by Junior's guy.
Exactly. By Mikey Palmici. He is connected, right? I don't know if he's an associate. I don't, but he's
maybe he's the same as what Christopher is then. Because Christopher
he's lower than Christopher, but he's what they call, that's when you refer, that's a friend of mine, right? A friend of ours is someone who is made. Yeah. And so, Salvitro is just someone who is friendly with the family of someone who's connected.
Yeah, he's an acquaintance. He's a straight guy who's an acquaintance.
He's a civilian, right?
He's Artie level.
Yeah, right. I don't even think he's Artie.
No, I don't think so. Artie's closer than that.
Yeah, because Artie is childhood friends with the boss.
Yeah.
But this guy is just like he's a neighborhood guy who cuts lawns, and he happens to be friendly with Paulie's aunt, so he's got a good deal for himself.
Tony loves Artie so much that when Artie is into him for 50 large, Tony forgives it. Like that's a testament to how much he loves Artie. Yeah. Like truly.
Yeah. So, but anyway, this guy Salvitro, I think this like perfectly exemplifies that as much as we might glorify these mobsters in these TV shows because they're fun to watch and they're it's a comedy or a dark comedy and stuff. These guys are they're thugs. You know what I mean? They're violent, brutal people. Yeah. And Feach just goes up to him and just starts beating the shit out of him and saying, "Hey, this is my cousin's, this is my nephew's route," or whatever it is,
Right.
Like, and just by, that's how they make their money, by being violent and beating the shit out of people. They're not like, they're like, so he does that. And apparently
Laura Connor, real quick. She says, in the end, your friends are going to let you down.
Yeah. It's all a big nothing, Johnny. That's what Lydia says. And there's a certain leitmotif throughout the whole show is that, in the end, nothing matters. And depression is kind of like the central theme to like this whole show.
It's true.
But yeah, so
Yeah, so Feach beats the crap out of this guy. He tries to take over the territory. He doesn't realize that he's stepping on Paulie's toes. Paulie, it goes back and forth without getting into all the nitty-gritty. It goes back and forth. The guys are beefing hard. Tony tries to alleviate the situation with
Tony wants to give him some money for the medical bills, and of course Paulie
Paulie wants to give him Paulie promises him $1,200 for the medical bills. And Tony says settle for $500 because they basically have a sit down.
Yeah, and then Paulie fucking pockets it, a large amount of it, and he's like, oh yeah, so and then they get him a deal, but now you're gonna have to cut a couple lawns.
Yeah, now I mean the guy Sal just gets Sal, and here's the other thing about with these mob guys in general. Like, if you're associated with Tony or any of these mob guys, your life in some way, shape, or form is going to be worse for it. Like, every single person that gets touched by this thing suffers in some irrevocable way. And it's kind of like Walter White, too, in a similar way.
I was going to say, it's like Game of Thrones, because you have like these lords, and these, highborns who are fighting their war and their power struggle and stuff. But the people who are really suffering are the small folk, the peasants who are out there and like they're getting their fields burned by, you know what I mean? It's like they're the ones who really feel the brunt of this power struggle more than anything. And their hands are clean is the thing. They didn't do anything wrong. And yet they're constantly suffering because of like the whims of these gangsters,
It's true, man. And you want to know that at the end of the day, it's a really sticky situation. And you know what else is sticky? Stickers. And Riot Stickers is the sponsor of the Frumess channel. And we have a special deal for you. If you need stickers, you can get 1,000 stickers for $79. That's I say it's 7 cents a sticker, 0.79 cents, but it's really 8 cents a sticker. The stickers themselves, they're printed on vinyl, which makes them very waterproof. They have a UV coating on them to protect them from the sun. And let me tell you something. I stick these suckers outside all day and all night, and man, they hold up. I go and I check on them from time to time just to see how the quality and the condition is going, and they're great, man. Sharpie Riot, CEO of Riot Stickers, claims that these stickers will last 5 years in the elements. I think it could go even longer. In any case, we're doing this deal. This is the only place you could find this deal. 1,000 stickers for $79 at riotstickers.com/Frumess. That's FRUMESS. Link is down in the description. Take advantage of this deal. It's something that you do not want to miss out on. Let's play our Less Than Jake theme song.
Posters and promo cards, there's nothing we can't print for you. From stage backdrops to bass drum heads, we can print on shirts, we can print on hats, we can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality, quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support, great customer service, and so much more. We are the bomb. RiotStickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb.
And we are back. We are discussing Sopranos season 5. We're talking about the episode Where's Johnny a little bit. We're kind of jumping all over the place. This is probably the point where we should mention Lorraine and her boyfriend, Jason. They are loan sharks, and she's the second cousin of Carmine, who she also had sex with, the boss, the big boss. And she's kind of stepping on Phil Leotardo's.
Are we talking about Lorraine Caluzzo?
Yes. And she's
got her little friend.
Yeah, Jason. Yeah. And she's collecting for little Carmine, and she's bumping heads with Phil Leotardo, and this eventually sort of ends. And it's kind of interesting because up until this point, within the mob, apart from in the old country, what's her face, who's the boss over there, everybody who's like kind of made is a man. There's no women doing stuff.
Lorraine Caluso is interesting because there's this one scene where she goes into a bar to collect the money, right? She goes in there and she's kind of intimidating and she's got the big guy chasing with her. And they give the money, right? And then Phil Leotardo comes in and shows you how it's really done.
Right.
And he comes in there and you realize what a vicious animal this guy is. He comes in there and she's like, "Oh, Phil, I was going to call you." And he goes, "How about this humidity?" And he just smacks her.
Yeah.
Knocks her down.
It's gnarly.
He takes the phone book and he puts a gun to it.
Right.
He says something about something about her sucking dick. And he asks Jason, like, "Oh, how's her head?" He goes, "What am I asking you for? You probably taught her how to do it." And then he shoots into the
phone book.
And he goes, "Oh, it only made it to the R's. Next time there won't be a next time." And you realize that's how you intimidate someone, man.
Well, I mean, it's just
Frank was incredible in that scene. And that's when you realize that, we're dealing with a fucking full-blown piece of shit here.
We're dealing with a maniac.
Maniac,
yeah. And eventually that whole scenario basically folds in on Lorraine. She is eventually clipped along with her boyfriend, and that's really the end of it. It's that sort of is cascading into this tension that's rising inside of the New York family. You also have Tony and Artie have been estranged since the whole $50,000 loan thing, and they mend fences together. Yeah, they mend fences. Artie ends up moving in with Tony.
Right. And then AJ is staying with them, and it's just like the boys play. They're farting and they're watching.
Yeah, they're eating pizza.
Actually, and when AJ wants to stay with him, and Carm's like, "Listen, he wants to live with you." And then the next scene is what's his name? Is Jackie Gleason going humana, and it's like it's the perfect transition. Because it's them watching the honeymooners, but that's also Tony's internal reaction to him.
Absolutely.
Like, and I thought that was a great little transition there.
It was.
Then they're sitting there and AJ's kind of trying to be like one of the boys, and he's like, "Oh, go and finish your homework." And he's like, "Oh, after this episode." And then Tony's like, "Wait, no.
Now.
Go finish your homework."
AJ,
and
now.
And I think that's when AJ realizes that like living with his dad
is not all it's cracked up.
It's not like he thinks it's going to be, because he's in his head. And I got to admit, man, I had this, and that's why watching this season is kind of heartbreaking for me, because it's like, I was like AJ, when I was that age, and it's like, I thought my dad was so cool, and my mom was like, and it's like, my mom was just like, you see Carm, she's just trying to do right by the kids, keep him out of it and everything. And, somehow she's the bad guy because she's got to, bring the rules. You know what I mean? And AJ does not like that, and so when I watch the season, I'm always like, oh man, like AJ's such a little shit. And I was such a little shit. Cause like I said, AJ is the same age as me. And,
Laura Connor here is bringing up I was trying to remember her name. The old world boss, the female.
Yes.
Suzuka, played by the goddess. She is a goddess, Sophia Milos. I mean, just a hunk of woman. Forgive me, but she's just a stunning woman. How about that?
From the episode Commendatore.
Right. In season 2, Junior's dementia is also starting to get worse, and obviously this is laying the seeds for what's going to happen in season 6, and it's going to be a thing. It's going to be a thing, and then we have the next episode. That's when Lorraine and Jason are murdered by Joey Peeps and Billy, who is Phil's younger brother, although he seems way younger. Phil seems so much older than him. And then the Feach wants his poker game back. He wants the game, the executive game that Tony robbed, turns out to be, is revealed to us, is the same game that Tony has been running this whole time. That's when fucking Davey gets in for the boxes of ziti. That same game, that was Feach's game.
God,
so Feach wants
Davey, the great Robert Patrick.
Yeah, great role, great in that role.
I mean, I know
great
we're
as
not
an addict, great as a gambling addict.
Oh,
my God,
incredible! When he's in there with his brother-in-law in the bar, and his brother's like, you know, that's
great.
Actually that whole arc is part of what makes the second season on par with 3 and 5 for me. It's whole really bust out situation with Dave.
Yes, the bust out situation is great. Oof. But now Feach is back, and Jeremy Spicy Walnuts over here was talking about how Feach is an old school guy who, you know, has a different way of doing things than these new guys, and he's trying to hold court when everybody just wants to play poker. Everybody's just trying to play poker.
He's got all his great stories.
He's got these stories. Nobody gives a shit. Tony comes in, you know,
and he's got all the comebacks. Like, you know,
well, also everybody's laughing at Tony's jokes, and Tony's paranoid. He thinks that, and this is something that I didn't ever notice the first time around. Everybody, like, the amount of like the competition and the sucking up and the behind the back resentment that they have for Tony was not, I mean, I just remembered everybody being diehard loyal when I first watched the show. And now you get to really see, you know, a lot of people are trying to play 4D chess, you know, Paulie Walnuts and Silvio have their issues. And, you know, it's great because it makes all the characters and their relationships more nuanced and layered than if everybody was just blindly loyal, you know, like as if it was Game of Thrones and everybody's just a loyal Stark Bannerman and this, that, and the other. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just a little bit more complicated. They really do. It makes them really feel like a family. At this poker game where Feach is telling his story, he gets a tip about some cars, about this rich guy who's having a wedding, this rich Jewish doctor who's going to have his wedding. You want to tell? Go ahead. You tell. Explain.
Well, no, I'm just laughing where they only took the imports. And the old Jewish guy, he goes, "Now who's an idiot for keeping my Regal?"
Yeah, that was so funny. You know, that was
it's a Buick Regal, which is of course an American car.
It's really it's a my funny grandfather.
My grandfather, who was an old Jewish man, he drove Mercuries and Fords. You know what I mean? It was
buy American.
Would never in a million years buy German or Japanese. That's for sure. And,
but Feach hires a bunch of guys to carjack the guests of this wedding.
I think it's like the prick doctor, right?
It's Dr. Ira, and he is once again he is a friend of he's a friend just in the way that Sal is a friend of Paul. He's a friend of Tony. He's always spending money at the executive game, and he goes to Tony. He says, "Tony, you got to do something. You got to get this car back. Everybody is looking down on me because they lost their cars." And Tony's like, "Well, everybody's got insurance, you know. I mean, And he's like, yeah, but there's this one car that's really you have to pay $30,000 just to pre-order it, and like." So he then goes to Feach, who eventually admits to doing the thing. And that's when Tony decides. Now, this is a very interesting watershed moment that I just want to quickly discuss, because when I was watching some going, so they snitched on him. They didn't snitch on him, but they sent him up. Basically, they have a really nuanced situation. Feach is
hold on. You're skipping a few things.
What am I skipping?
One of which is Feach, who is old school, knows that Junior is, he's the nominal boss, right? Junior.
That's true.
Junior still runs his family, and so he kind of tries to take the same maneuver that Richie Aprile did, which was, like, I'm here for you, Don Corrado. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he thinks that maybe if he can align himself,
he's stirring the pot. Not just that, but he's thinking if he can make himself a trusted soldier of Junior, that maybe he can sort of usurp Tony or undermine. He can
undermine him, because after all, Corrado is the boss. So he tries to do that, and basically Tony has this revelation where he sees. I think Carm is the one who actually brings it to light. Carm says something about how, like, you don't have friends, you have like yes men and stuff. And
Right. And
Tony
that's when
kinda
he gets
realizes
paranoid.
Tony realizes that, wow, like everyone is just laughing at my jokes. Like my jokes weren't even that funny. Everyone's
Right.
laughing. And
That
then he
happens at the
watches
poker
it,
game.
and at the poker game, and I mean, everyone is just like so over the top laughing at his jokes. And then Feach, he has that memory, and Feach is just looking at him like this, like,
Yeah.
and so Tony says, did I learn nothing from Richie Aprile?
Right. Oh, yeah. Right. He has a flashback and he sees that Feach wasn't the guy laughing, and he realizes that Feach is not a loyal goon that will
and
follow
he needs
him.
to nip it in the bud, right? And so,
right.
Anyway, was it Benny? Is it Benny and Christopher? They walk over there, and it's like
work him over so
they
easily.
work him over, and he's like, "Hey, I'm just enjoying my peaches and wine."
Yeah, I thought, it's funny, when I was watching that, I'd forgotten what had happened. I just thought he was whacked. I thought they were going to just take him inside and clip him, and
No,
that's
they set him up. But
yeah,
they
that's
don't
the
really
thing
set
about
him
these
up.
mobster
He
guys.
begs for it.
Yes, he does. He does.
He's
he really.
Like, oh no, I got my garage right here. It's fine.
Yeah, he walks right into it, and there's this moment where he's going back on. We see him riding back to prison, because at the end of the day, they don't want to clip him. It's not good to clip him. They need to make him go away for a very long time, and at the same time, of course, he's going to die in there.
Yeah.
So it's basically, in a way, he probably would have been better off just getting clipped than to go back and spend the rest of his days in prison like that.
Maybe, but I mean, he's a guy who's probably really very much acclimated to being in prison, and he probably, that's he spent 20 years portion of his life there, right? So
yeah, it's a good point. He's pretty institutionalized, but he gazes at the outside world, and what happens is a parole officer comes a week after his regular parole officer had come in. It's just, he's done. He knows he's done. He knows his goose is cooked. But on the bus on the way back to prison, you kind of are like wondering, what is he thinking about? Does he realize that he was set up? And ultimately, I don't think he does. I think he thinks that it just, I don't know. I don't think he does.
I think he knows. It was like, I think he probably knows.
Everything that happens with AJ is so inconsequential. It's really kind of filler to me. Like, it's interesting to watch, but it also, like, none of it really goes anywhere unless it's AJ, like, specifically, unless it's AJ specific. I mean, I guess it has to do with the family dynamic. AJ goes to see Mudvayne and stays in a hotel room, and he gets his face glued to a carpet, and he basically what he does, he just wants to do what he wants to do. His mom bends because she wants AJ to, adore him.
She wants to be the good guy.
She wants to be the good guy, and he basically, like, he takes no quarter with her. Like, she gives him a fucking finger, and he takes the whole hand.
And of course, I mean, there's so much stuff like that with, like, the pizza and the pool and in earlier seasons and stuff.
He's just a fucking menace, that fucking kid.
He is, and he doesn't mean, well, he's just an idiot. He just does bad stuff, and I relate to all that stuff. Like, it's like, I don't know why I did that,
sure,
but I did it.
I that episode I can relate to too, because I definitely had that sort of situation in my past as well, where it's like, you just push and push and push and push, because you just want to do what you want to fucking do, and that's it.
And
bottom up, you're a teenager, you don't give a shit about anybody else.
And Tony has some weird comment about his eyebrows and, like, poppers and, like, weird sex or something.
Yeah, he thought he was into some weird.
And Carm and AJ are both looking at him like, wait, what?
Yeah.
He's like, I've seen the news.
I know.
Then, he realizes,
I know what's going on.
He's like, it's like, he has the conversation with Carm, and she's like really upset.
Yeah.
And he's like, nothing really happened. They'll grow back. And she's like, they have two very different ways of looking at it. And they're both right, because he was being an adolescent, and shit happens. But Carm was kicking herself because she didn't trust she went against her better judgment, for the sake of being the good guy, because she wanted to be cool, because AJ thinks his dad's so cool and that she's the bitch, and she wanted to be cool for once.
And eventually he ends up moving back in with his mom, and AJ's happy about it. Tony he can't handle living with his
dad. his dad's eating pizza and cereal all day.
Every day, and he doesn't buy the cereal that AJ likes. Tony and Adriana end up bonding over, Tony has a mole removed that turns out to be cancerous that he has to watch. Adriana has her IBS, and she's dealing with her stuff. Christopher goes out of town. This turns into a whole thing. Chris goes out of town.
Cigarettes in Virginia or something.
He's doing a cigarette smuggling job, and while he is gone, Tony and Adriana almost hook up.
Not only do they almost hook up, but he starts fantasizing about like marrying her and like moving off with her and
it's
having
so bizarre. It's so
he's really out to lunch.
It's not just out to lunch. It's like he doesn't even know what he wants. He just is like you know what it is? It's like he gets so uncomfortable with his life that he turns to any distraction that will, make him feel like this is what I need to do to make myself feel okay. So I need to marry Adriana and have kids with her, and my life will be okay. And
Melfi is just like, dude, this is someone who is like gonna marry someone that you treat like a son, and like this is like obviously the wrong. And she's like, you're having a moment of clarity right now. Like, she says, like,
Laura says, time to see Dr. Melfi. Yes.
She's like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's like a contingent of people who watch The Sopranos and skip the Melfi scenes. Have you ever heard of this?
No. Why do they do that?
Because they have no taste and they don't understand what makes good television. I have no idea. They think they're boring or something like that. It's like absolutely insane. That's some of the best. I mean, that's what, in a way, that's kind of what
they just don't like. They just don't like the back and forth between.
I don't know what it is. But there are those people, and I think the thing about this is that I think there's people that like when they see like the way Tony acts and like the way people who act like that, they think like that they're supposed to look up to that, and they're like, oh, that's a real alpha move. And they don't realize that like these people are pieces of shit. I mean, they're pieces of shit and they're human and they have likable characteristics, you know what I mean? And they have depth to them, which is what's great about this show. No one is black and white, but I think there's a lot of these sort of wannabe tough guy types who watch this show and I think they sort of miss the point about the toxicity.
Well, that's characters. Just like with the Joker and Fight Club and all that shit. It's all the same shit. And Scarface and this, that, and the other. Yeah. In any case,
it's like, so why do they want to watch the Melfi scenes? You know what I mean? Because that's boring or whatever. I don't know. But
so Tony and Adriana end up driving to Dover to buy cocaine.
Yeah, and Tony, it's gonna happen. If they don't get in that car accident, he's gonna fuck her. It's going to happen. They're on. He resists thus far, but he is on he's like a moth drawn to the light. It's like an airplane in its final descent. Eventually it is going to land. He wants to resist. He wants to want to resist.
He has to.
He knows what he's doing. And
in any case, they're driving to get cocaine. Tony is even doing cocaine, which is super weird. He's doing cocaine with Adriana. They're bonding. They almost kiss. That's as close as they ever get. Mm-hmm. But Tony tries to keep from hitting a raccoon, and the SUV flips over. They both sustain damage. Adriana, she's in a neck brace, and a game of telephone is played.
And it's let's just say it's very bad optics.
Right. It's very bad optics, number one. Number two, and here's the thing about the mob in general in this show. Everything is about optics. Everything. Yes. For a great example, I'm about to watch, we'll talk about this in the final segment of the series. Friggin' Vito being gay. Listen, there's nothing wrong with being gay, period. But the idea for these mobsters that one of them, well, right, but the fact that one of them is gay affects the entire crew as it relates to all the other families. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same with everything. With everything, it's the same. It's always about optics. It's about strength. These guys who think that they're soldiers in a war, who, you know, who have to put up a front at all times. So for Chris to basically be at the butt of all these jokes of his woman being, you know, finagled by the boss is just, it's the worst. It's literally the worst. It just, you know, it affects everything.
Yeah. And I want to get to Vito, but yeah, I mean, and Chris, he doesn't care if he dies. You know what I mean? He gets all fucked up. He's got a gun. I mean, he should, for the way he reacts, should get him killed. If that was anyone besides Christopher,
right? And he almost does get killed. They pull him out and they hold a gun to his head, and he's going to do it. It's the second time that, what do they call it? I forgot the term. They used it earlier in the seasons, where you almost get whacked. It's like a warning. I forgot. It happens to Chris where he shits his pants.
Yes,
he's terrified.
Like
right in
season 1, episode 2.
Is it episode 2? He
I mean, technically it's episode, I think it's 2.
I mean, he just relapses like hard. And also around this time, you know, Chris has been in a 12-step program. He meets a writer, and this just goes to show, you know, how much Chris has compartmentalized, you know, his recovery. You know, to be in recovery, being in recovery directly conflicts with being a mobster on every single level. It does. And I'll tell you something, you know, it happens. It actually happens. There are mobsters that absolutely get sober and they go to 12-step programs. And, you know, like when you're in a 12-step program, you're supposed to be turning over a new leaf, and to think of the things that this person must be doing outside of their 12-step program, that, you know, so it's this weird sort of like dichotomy there where Chris is sober, but, you know, he's at the same time, he's shaking down somebody for money. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And then he starts like using slogans and stuff. And it's just like,
well, it's just funny because he's like, on one end, he's like, come on, I know you can do this. I know you can get it together. Where's my fucking money? It's like, it's just like,
that's season 6 or 5 with JT, where JT starts owing him money and stuff like that. And Chris starts, you know, Chris sends Murmur to collect money from him.
No, that happens in season 5. You mean the guy when JT has to like try and pawn his Emmy and everything?
Yes.
That's season 5.
And he's saying to JT, he's like, hey, there's
gives him his roadster. He has to give up his roadster and he goes to rehab.
He's like, there's no physical solution for a spiritual problem.
No, he says that is a popular slogan in those communities. And what you say is what it is there's no physical solution to a spiritual problem.
Yeah. And he's saying that to JT
after taking his car. Like, it's just crazy.
And he's like, says to JT, he's like,
so compartmentalized.
Yeah, I love it. And, you know, and JT doesn't think Chris, you know, he knows Chris, he's not going to like shake him down, but he shows up there with that guy Murmur and they're ready to fuck him up.
Well, JT at first, he's just like, come on, what is this? You're full of shit. Like he totally thought that, you know, everything was fine. And basically, you know, everything happens in there. It's all patterns. Like, you know, Richie April is basically the same guy as Ralphie to an extent. Davey is very similar to JT. The Sopranos never really reinvents the wheel throughout the seasons.
Can I give you another example?
Yeah, absolutely. There's just variations on the same thing that happens over and over again.
In the first season, you have, I mean, Christopher is a little different because he's a main character, but you have Christopher and Brendan Falone, who are kind of like the fuck boys, right? Who are young and they're the cowboys and they want to make it big. And so they're kind of idiots and they're like the younger generation, right? And they're robbing the trucks. Then the second season, you have Matt Bevilacqua and Sean Gismondi, who are the guys who wind up shooting Christopher, right? Season 3, you kind of have Jackie Jr., who's kind of that same kind of role. You know what I mean? You always, there's sort of these tropes that,
to an extent, Tony B is that as well. He's like the last version of that because he's the closest. Tony B is the closest to being a made guy out of all those guys. It's like a progression, and Tony B is the final one. Tony B is a guy who was somewhat connected, running in circles, goes to prison, gets out, tries to reform himself, and then ends up getting sucked into that life. He's
and
the
wants
last
to make it big,
version,
and he fucking
right.
takes like a Hail Mary
He is
kind of move.
He is the last version of that sort of evolution. Tony B is the final phase, even though he feels most like these guys. And mind you, he's also kind of, I just want to quickly touch on something before we move on. He's also, bothering Tony with some of his jokes. He's making jokes about Tony's weight. Tony says, right. And he's saying stuff. He's saying to him, he's going, you can't make fun of me like that in front of me. I'm the boss now. You can't make fun of me like that. I have to look like I am respected by everybody. So everything's optics.
They have Christopher and Tony B, they go up to Uncle Pat's house up in Kinderhook or whatever, which winds up being a significant place for Tony B at the end of the season. But they go up there to try and find some bodies before Uncle Pat sells the place.
Wait. Save cold cuts for cold cuts. Let's get to cold cuts right now, though.
Is this in cold cuts?
That's cold cuts. But
I thought cold cuts is the anger management episode.
That's all the same episode.
Oh, really?
That was a fucking huge episode. But hold on. But we're almost there. Let me just cover this real quickly. Okay. Chris ends up. Chris gets drunk. He's looking for Tony. Tony convinces Chris that nothing was going on between him and Adriana. Tony also has to convince Carm of the same thing. Carm is furious over this. Mm-hmm. And the way, again, going back to appearances, they all
Carm has a way of belittling Tony that no one else can really do.
She's the only one. You know what's funny about Carm? Carm is the only one, even when they're at their worst, when they're screaming at each other, Tony can't hit Carm. He punches a wall instead. She is like somehow invincible to all of his anger. She can somehow negotiate it. The way that they solve this problem with Chris and Adriana is again with optics. They fight optics with more optics. They go to Vesuvio and they all have dinner. Tony says, Carm, will you do me this favor? Carm, I need you to do me a favor. And they all have dinner together and everybody's there because Vesuvio is like the hangout, and that shows everybody that everything is okay and they can kind of they can move on. Then we have Tony. This is the episode where Tony finds it more and more difficult to deal with AJ, and eventually that's when he gets sent back to Carmela. And when she lets him move back in on condition about his grades and his behavior and stuff, yada yada yada. Carm meets with Father Phil again, who's such a, as us Jews call, a schnurr. He's such a mooch, a schnurr or whatever. He's trying to guilt her because she's sleeping with AJ's guidance counselor.
Is a SUNY Purchase alum.
Who is
that actor? Father Phil in Centola.
Oh, that's cool. We were right next to SUNY Purchase. As a matter of fact, Jeremy works right next to SUNY Purchase. Mm-hmm. Hold on. The guidance counselor, Carm, starts having an affair. Not an affair. I mean, she's separated from Tony. Carm starts
Dr. Wiggler.
She starts getting her groove back, and it's awesome. And she's having a wonderful fling, and they're in that like passionate honeymoon stage. And eventually,
but she's kind of working him without even realizing.
Well, that's what he thinks. I don't know if she does. I think she just is obsessed about that stuff. I think she's legitimately having a good time apart from the guilt that she feels from Father Phil or whatever.
He's so out of her league. This is a guy who's like well read, and he's like, trying to. And she's like
he's super intellectual, and she's
very provincial. Is what she is. She's provincial.
What does that word mean?
It means
that's a great word. I know the word. I just don't know
my understanding of that word.
Hold on, we're looking it up right now.
She's not sophisticated in that. She doesn't have much experience outside of her own bubble. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that
she
area
wants to be more than what she is.
That she's not. She's got she doesn't have much experience like outside of like New Jersey and New Jersey people.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
You're everything you're saying is right, but do you want to hear what the definition of provincial means?
What?
Oh, actually, it's right here. I was going to say it was absolutely the wrong word, but no. Okay, so here's how it is. Here's how it is as an adjective: of or concerning the regions outside the capital city of a country, especially when regarded as unsophisticated or narrow-minded. So I think the word to pull from the word that you use, which is a great word, and I think you used it in the right way, would just be that she's unsophisticated. She's just not as sophisticated as he is. And he knows about these books, and she wants to remember the Billy Budd conversation at dinner with Finn. And she's like, what do you mean he's gay? Like, she's like, no idea what the subtext of the book. And Meadow, who's like this academic, and Finn, who's an academic, they all know. And she makes a fool out of herself at the table for not realizing this. So she wants to be, she likes to have tea under the portrait of Eloise. Like, she wants to be she wants to be greater than maybe what she is or what she's capable of in that moment. Not saying that she can't be. She can be anything she wants to be. It's just a little bit above. It's a delusion of grandeur to an extent. It's like a delusion that she has. So this guy is out of her league. He thinks that she's using her. They break up. Tony B is trying to deal with this, whole storefront situation. He's trying, this guy, Kim, who he works for, basically decides he wants to go into business with him.
Played by the great New York actor. I want to say his name is it Henry Yuck, who was in the movie The Last Dragon. You familiar with The Last Dragon?
I know The Last Dragon, but I haven't seen it in a very long time. He's great. He's great in this episode, and he's great in his role. And he is. He's basically like, he wants to go into business with Tony B. Tony B is like, wow, look what happens when you try to do the right thing. Everything works out in the end, because Tony B doesn't know how he's going to be a massage therapist. He's not even sure he can pass the exam. He finally passed the exam, and then something happens that really sort of unravels Tony B. He comes across a bag containing $12,000 thrown away by some drug dealers who were trying to get away from the police. And he starts spending the money on clothes and gambling. He buys Game Boys for his twin sons. And at the same time, he's like burning the candle on both ends. He's trying to get his storefront ready, and he decides to take it all out on Kim for no reason. I mean, Kim has been nothing but kind to him, but he puts all of his resentments onto Kim, and it's slightly racist.
Oh, it's incredibly racist.
Well, I mean, it's subtly racist. It doesn't start off that way, but then when he starts to get very mad about the way that he pronounces things with his, his accent, because he's Korean. Korean's his first language, and Tony B just lets him have it. So it's funny how Tony B starts off as this seems to be like this somewhat enlightened, reformed guy who just slowly devolves.
Yeah. He devolves, and then suddenly he's in it to win it.
He's in it to win it. Yes.
And I don't know. That was hard for me to watch that scene, because Mr. Kim is a guy who is, I think, first a little leery of Tony B. At first, and he kind of judges him at first. But then he warms to him, and he sees that he's a hard worker, and he gives him this opportunity, a great opportunity.
Yep.
And I feel like Tony B has like a Walter White moment, where it's just like his actions in that moment are so against his own benefit and his own interests. And it's just like a pure, when Walter has the car and he can return it, and he's like, let me just fucking burn the thing and cost myself a bunch of money. It's just like one of those things. Let me just fucking act on emotion that has nothing to do with gaining anything or any sort of, he just fucking, I don't know. I'm just going to fight. Does he kill him?
No, he just beats the crap out of Kim. you're not sure what's going to happen, but you know it's the end of an episode, and you know sometimes
he gives him a nasty fucking beating.
Oh,
man.
he just beats the crap out of him with like a 2x4. It's really upsetting because you watch him basically destroy everything that he's built up into this moment. It's very sad because you're rooting for Tony B to be better than what he is. And that leads into Tony's aunt dying, and he meets his father's longtime guma, and she's kind of like coming on to him. He's enamored by her.
Oh, is this in Camelot?
Yes, and she tells.
So here's another episode.
Yeah,
where, what's the opposite of
kind of a contained episode?
People hate this episode, from what I've heard. I really like it.
I like it a lot. It's good.
I think there's a lot.
Do you think
of
her
insight
son?
On,
do you think her son is his half brother?
I never even considered that.
I totally thought that as soon as I saw
but the thing with the car, the whole thing gives me the ick, as they say, you know, and her trying to be sexy, singing like Marilyn Monroe with the hat.
Yeah, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch.
It's really hard to watch, and I think people don't like that, but I think that's what's so great about it, because that's what it was meant to be. And you see it in Tony's face. He just has a shift.
Well, it's diminishing returns. When he first meets her, hold on, super quick. This is what happens. He meets the guma. Tony, he starts supporting the guma a little bit. He's giving her money. He ends up, her retirement was tied in with Tony's old man. They sell this racetrack place. She gets a cut of the money. The whole time that this is happening,
it puts a little bit of a wedge between him and Hesh.
It does, because Hesh knew the guma as well, and Hesh is not crazy about the guma at all. But this is like a piece of his father in the guma, because the guma knew an aspect, a whole side of his father that he never did, and very slowly his view of the guma just slowly changes as he realizes how callous she kind of is, and how she's just all about having a good time and doesn't care about, like, you know,
the thing with the dog that they gave away. Like, he realizes kind of how his dad was always lying to him and the family, and kind of chose her over his own mom at the same time. And like, there's a lot of
kind of understands that, though. He
does.
Livia was so insufferable, and you know that he didn't blame his father for that. He was like Livia. He always thought that Livia. Oh, he says it in Melfi's office. Actually, he says that you know, my mom, she was so terrible. Like, look what she did. He drove it to her. He drove her to the guma. You know.
Yeah, but he also like has this whole thing about sticking up for her. You know, and like, oh, she was a good mom. Whereas like Melfi's trying to get him to admit that, like, yo, your mom was. Like, toxic.
Yes, that's true. Right. Well, they're like, we haven't addressed the fact that your mom tried to have you killed. Like,
and he like plays it off like, no, I don't. You don't know
every
what you're
time.
Talking about. She was an old lady.
Why? You know why? Because for him to acknowledge that would be so unnerving. It would cause him to crack in a way that would not allow him to function in his day-to-day. It's like he can't open up that box, because if he does, he's going to have to deal with everything that's going to come out as a result. It's better for that box to just remain closed. Yes, mom, try to do this to me. I need to like not think about it, because if I think about it, it's going to drive me insane. That's what I mean. That's what I think. That's my POV on it. But he ends up giving Fran, her name's Fran. He ends up giving Fran $150K, and she's not, you know, she's supposed to use this money to keep her heat on and her electricity on, and she's buying fancy shoes. And, you know, she's trying to ploy Tony with like, she, you know, she used to be JFK's girlfriend. Tony loves JFK. Tony's a big historian. He loves eating ice cream on the couch and watching old war stuff. It's just a great little character touch about Tony when he's not being a boss. He just likes to, just wants to eat his ice cream and just, you know, enjoy his documentaries.
Well, because when you think about it, he's
very father thing to do.
Yes.
You know,
he's got it coming from all angles all the time. He's got stress at work. He's got stress in the family. All he wants to do is, you know, watch a World War II documentary on the History Channel and eat some ice cream. And, you know, Carm always wants to talk about the spec house or planning, and he just can't relax, you know, as much as he may like.
By the way, this is the episode where JT is introduced, and this is when he goes into Chris for 60 large. He doesn't think that Chris is going to really get the money from him. We already just talked about already, but that's the episode where it happens.
Yeah.
Tony's friendship eventually sours with her, and she starts smoking. It's funny. He's reminded of a situation where his mother had a miscarriage and his father was with the Guma, and it really makes Tony kind of, upset. And there's no real closure with Tony, except for the fact that, once again, it's another example where Tony, it was the same thing with the one-legged Russian girl. Any chance Tony gets to save face in front of his friends, he will do so. So suddenly her one night stand with JFK turned into she was JFK's girlfriend for 3 years on the Bing. And that, when he's regaling all his friends. And that's like, I guess that's what David Chase wants us to ultimately take away from this episode is that, for Tony, it's always about appearances. Even in Dr. Melfi's office, which is kind of really is at the core of him going to therapy. It's not even so much of a mobster going to therapy. It's a mobster who's obsessed with, making appearing one particular way and then trying to get underneath his layers and just not, doing it with limited degrees of success, because any other Hollywood sort of formula would be like, and this is the part where the mobster learns the meaning of his ways and changes in some way. But as you said to me off camera, Tony never changes, or he changes a little bit. It goes up and down, and it doesn't really. Yeah. So, the next episode features a surprise party for her dad, Hugh. Fucking Junior spoils the surprise. This is off Carm.
Dr. Fagoli.
Dr. Fagoli. There's a whole little thing with Dr. Fagoli being like a snooty Italian, and Carm realizes that her mom didn't want Tony there because she doesn't. Again, one of the themes of the show
she sees him as a gavone,
but also the idea that Italians being something other than these mafia stereotypes. That's like a reoccurring theme in The Sopranos. And this is another aspect of this where Dr. Fagoli is this learned doctor, and Tony, who's throwing
allergic to tomatoes.
Yeah, who's allergic to tomatoes, which says all you need to know. Because Italians, they have tomatoes in their blood, right? Like, it's to be Italian is to bleed tomato sauce.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an interesting sort of little like observation about what kind of Italian this guy is as opposed to Italians. I don't know.
And then they have the real thing about that episode is Carm wants him there because he's the grill master.
Right, he's the master of ceremonies. It's his house. It's his party,
and she wants him there, and they end up sleeping together.
Yes, they do in the pool. It's another contained episode that's anchored. A lot of the episodes are kind of contained.
And
there's also an aspect of mob life,
Also, the whole thing with. I think this is also part of why Tony B. The kids steal. What do they steal? A Game Boy or something like that.
No, they take a pin collection, Olympic pins, from AJ in his closet, and that pisses off Tony's B. He takes the video games back. By this time, Tony B's wife is out of the picture. Now ex-wife, they split up again. He's off, he's got a new girlfriend. There's tensions arising between New York, there's like this whole sinking of yachts with little Carmine. And this ends up turning into what ends up happening is little Carmine comes to Tony B with Angelo and says, because Angelo was the capo that was in prison with Tony B. And he says, we want you to get rid of this guy, Joey Peeps, who's Johnny Sack's guy. Yeah. He's Johnny Sack's Christopher Moltisanti. That's who Joey Peeps is. And Tony B initially doesn't want to do it, but then he ends up doing it. He whacks Johnny Peeps. This is a huge no. This is
Yeah,
such a
because
bad thing that he
it's
does.
like Rusty Milio, played by Frankie
He's a capo
Valli,
too. He's a capo
is
too.
making a power play.
Oh, that's Frankie Valli? That's the real
Yes.
life Frankie Valli?
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool.
Which is
he's making a power play. Right.
Yeah, he's making a power play, and he knows that Tony B is like not really a neutral party, but he knows that him and Angelo were close in the can, and that he can probably use him, and you know, he's eager, and he's like kind of pissed off at Tony at the time too. He's like kind of pissed off at
right. Well, that's eventually when initially he says, I'm not going to do it. And then he decides to do it. And this is when, you know, again, the money's starting to run. He's starting to run low on money. He's getting into the life. Tony B is getting into the life. When he whacks Joey Peeps, he gets his foot run over. And this is the smoking gun. Tony is able to figure out immediately from a description of someone who was running away from the scene that was limping, puts two and two together.
He starts almost having a panic attack when he hears that.
Sure.
Because that's his big fear. You know what I mean? He wants
it's connected to what happened 17 years ago as well.
Exactly. And that's why it has such a deep response in him. And he starts feeling that the panic attack being
right.
triggered.
He's on the golf course and he collapses. He's playing golf with Johnny Seck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think what else happens. Tony just is the king of the party, and Carm is so happy.
He's twirling the sausages around.
He's twirling the sausages. He gives a really cool looking shotgun,
a Beretta
shotgun. It's like a beautiful gun to Hugh, who's such a great guy. Hugh has the time of his life.
It's all wasted and shit.
Yeah, he gets super wasted. He has to be put in the car. You know, he also, by the way, another reason why he whacks the guy, you know, the twins, Tony B's twins, they're like, we hate coming back to grandma's house.
Yes,
we want to stay at Uncle Tony's house. And that's when Tony B, he just gets motivated. It's like, you know, it's funny. We really don't ever get inside of Tony B's psyche the way we do everybody else. Everything that Tony B does happens externally. We are watching it external. We don't get inside of his inner dialogue. So we don't really know what his machinations are. We just see how he reacts to outward things that happen. In his case, the kid's saying, we want what they have. And he goes, he then decides to do the hit because he wants to get paid, you know. Carm and Tony sleep together. It's a great, and then there's this whole thing where Phil owes Tony money. Phil gets into a car accident because of Tony. Tony agrees to pay for the car. That Angie has Pussy's garage, the auto body shop. And there's this whole back and forth. And this is where we see, like, Phil is such an insufferable prick. He's just such a fucking ball buster about shit.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's this whole back and forth. And we get to see how, you know, Tony's like let Angie back in sort of by running the shop. But at the same time, she's trying to like come to him to be considerate about how much money it's going to cost because Tony's paying for it. And he just wants to stress her out. He's like, you figure it out.
Because it's like his way of kind of getting back
sticking at it. Yeah, he's sticking it to her. He is. Even though he's deeply affected by killing Pussy. Deeply affected. Dreams about Pussy throughout the entire he dreams about Pussy. Throughout the entire show, Pussy. He dreams about Big Pussy. He dreams about him and whatnot. Next episode, we're coming up to Cold Cuts. Tony B's foot injury. And he tried to, again, blame it on being attacked by a black man. You know, just again, that racist sort of stuff comes out. Tony learns that that from Johnny that the killer of Peeps was limping. That's how he figures it all out.
And that's when you get that whole scene of them at the funeral. And there's something like the stone says Joey Peeps or something, which is obviously not his real name.
Yeah, because someone messed up the tombstone because they're gonna kick in for the tombstone. They don't know that Tony B has done this yet except for Tony, who's ready to just totally lie about it. He's ready to cover for his cousin. He so desperately wants to make things work with his cousin.
Yeah.
And
it's all rooted in his guilt over his cousin
over the arrest in the 80s. And that's when the panic attack happens, blah, 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 blah. And we learn the truth about the panic attack with his fight after the fight with his.
But he really puts himself on the line. He's having that conversation with Johnny Sack in the limo, and Johnny Sack doesn't know, but Johnny Sack is incensed, and Tony.
He always gets incensed though.
Yes,
Johnny Sack is such a little fucking baby.
Tony though.
I love the way he talks too, with like a little bit of this.
Tony has to make a decision at that moment. He has to listen. Am I gonna lie and cause potentially a war with the New York family,
right?
Or am I gonna give up my cousin, who obviously there's a lot of guilt?
Well, wait. We're almost there. We're almost there. Let's talk very quickly. Finn starts working construction. Long story short, Finn and Meadow have a fight. Finn ends up working construction on the same no job site as all the other mobsters.
No, yeah, and that's an interesting thing because I love, they all go to the beach, and I think it's
they don't go to the beach. They just sit at the site and they sit in the lawn chairs.
Not them. Yeah, and he starts witnessing some of the violence.
And he's deeply affected. Finn gets deeply affected and uneasy. And then he sees something we get to see.
But I want to backtrack for a second. Okay. Because before he even sees that, after work, he goes to the beach and Meadow and all the friends are there and they're listening.
Oh, right. Yes.
They're listening to some new age music with bongos and drums, and there's a bonfire, and you just hear one of them say I think I'm going to go to film school for the summer or whatever. And it's this is the perfect image of privileged Columbia University kids in their early 20s.
It is. It's a snapshot. It's a snapshot.
It's a perfect snapshot.
You're right. You're right.
And I love that scene for it so much. And then he's like, I think I'm going to head out and, get to the work site early.
Yeah, he's like, there's no point in going home. I'm just going to sleep there and wake up. And what does he see, Jeremy? What does he see? The greatest thing in the world.
Honestly, what he sees is
it's shocking. The first time you see it, it's shocking because you're never expecting it. It's the last thing
it's shocking.
You're not expecting
that. Puts him in
serious danger.
Serious danger. I cannot imagine what it must have been like for him.
Well, these guys will whack you if you blink the wrong way. If you blink the wrong way, they'll whack you. For him to find out. So what happens?
And he plays it so well. Not Finn and the way he reacts, but the actor playing Finn, who's a very interesting character. The actor, I think he became a director. He's someone who I heard interviewed by Michael Imperioli and Steve Sharippa on the Talking Sopranos podcast.
I'm going to listen to that podcast.
He is a really interesting guy, really smart guy, articulate, knows a lot about film and acting. The actor whose
his name is Will Janowitz.
Yes, Will Janowitz. So I just think he plays that unease and fear so truthfully. I feel like Finn's reaction in that moment and the way he acts on the job site that day, and I just think it's brilliant. Well, I think his acting in that episode is brilliant.
By the way, I told you guys before in previous episode that I know Meadow's cousin. So does Jeremy. We both know Meadow's cousin
and Adriana's cousin as well.
Who is Adriana's cousin?
Adriana, played by Drea Di Matteo, is, I believe, first cousin.
Get the fuck out of here with Di Matteo.
Yeah.
We knew two. That is so fucking crazy. We knew a Sigler and we knew a Di Matteo. How about that?
Yeah, my younger brother, one of his best friends since kindergarten is, I believe, I want to say first cousins with Drea Di Matteo.
There you go. In any case, Finn sees Vito. He sees
blowing
Vito,
a security guard.
Yeah, blowing a securody guard. And it's just the way that they shot this, it's just so perfect because it's the last thing you're expecting.
Which I gotta be honest, I never thought about this until just now. I don't want to say the writing was sloppy on this, but
What?
it's not. But I had never thought about it like this until just now. Is that if Vito's going to blow a guy, it's not going to be on a job, like at a job site where he works. You know what I mean? He's going to be more careful about it. You know, in season 6, when he's at the gay bar, he's at the club wearing his chaps and stuff.
Which I
and
just
he's
watched tonight. I just saw it tonight.
He's out in the sticks somewhere. You know what I mean?
No, he's in New York. He's in New York City.
Oh.
They find him in New York City. He's just listen. He thinks that it's just he could just do this on the down low. You know, he's there super early. There's nobody else there. The security guard is the guy who's guarding the job
show up
site.
Places early. I mean, especially a construction site. Because I know construction workers. They start working at 5, 6 in the morning. You know what I mean? Like you got to be a little more careful than that, bro. Especially when you know that. You know, it's one thing to be outed. It's another thing to be outed when your life is on the line. I just think that he could have been a little bit more slick.
I just don't. Well, what was really stupid, it wasn't the place or the time or anything. What made it stupid was that why on earth would you just lift up your head like that? Why would he lift up his head like that? Like that was the weird thing.
Yeah.
In any case, now we have this whole like cat and mouse thing happening in the background between Vito and Finn. And it kind of fizzles out. Like nothing really comes of it. I guess,
and Meadow thinks he's crazy.
Right. Meadow is thinks it's impossible.
Vito Spatafore is a married man. Like
they keep saying that. They say that in the episode in season 6 I'm watching right now. Same thing. Yeah. But and Vito tries to take him to a Yankees game, and he legitimately wanted to go to a Yankees game. It wasn't a ploy.
My arch nemesis. And he shows, and there's that shot of him sitting there with the tickets and
he's like standing around waiting for Finn. Like it wasn't like a ploy to try and whack him. He really wanted to go to the game with him. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's why I say he's like, I don't know if he wants to kill me or if he wants to fuck me.
A little bit of both. That's the way Vito's playing it. That's the way Vito's playing it. Carmela wants to divorce Tony. She wants to get, her share of what, of their stuff. And she talks to a forensic accountant to help her do that. And Tony takes the advice of the lawyer that he almost moved next to at the end of season 3 at Whitecaps, when the lawyer's like, listen, have consultation with every divorce lawyer in the area. And then they can't take her. They won't be able to take on your ex-wife. That's exactly what Tony does. And we've seen this behavior before in another TV dad, where in that of Walter White, who his wife wants out, and Walter does everything he can to keep her from getting out. Yeah. And that's a whole other, like, man, I could literally talk about that for hours. It's a whole other thing that we're not going to get into, except that in both situations, these women are trapped with husbands who are essentially monsters on a variety of different levels. And they literally are powerless to leave. And they both react in very different ways. Some of the ways they react is similar. Some of the ways not so similar. In any case, Tony and Johnny, this is to me, this might be one of the finest episodes of The Sopranos. It's called Cold Cuts. The reason why I think it's so great, and Jeremy has said that it's an episode that he really enjoys as well. The reason why I think Cold Cuts is so great is because it's just, we get a lot of character stuff. It's just, that's the most rewarding shit. It's not, you have two different types of narratives, right? You have plot that's driving story forward, or you have character study or character work. And character work doesn't necessarily drive the plot forward, but it gives us deeper understanding of our characters. And that's what this episode is all about. It's a contained episode. They go up to Uncle Pat's farm. Uncle Pat is somehow everybody's uncle. They all spent time up there when they were kids. And we get this this is the first time that we're supposed to have this cohesive understanding that Tony B, and Christopher all grew up together and knew each other. And they feel like this cohesive family.
Christopher has resentment against Tony B because there's
a lot of resentment going on. There's a lot of interconnected resentment.
Well, because he sees, as we know, we already know why Tony Soprano is being so good to Tony B because of the guilt and all that stuff, right? But Christopher doesn't like that. He thinks that he's being ignored or he's being put
he's
on
the third wheel. He's the third wheel. When it's just one-on-one, when he's one-on-one with Tony B or when he's one-on-one with Tony.
No. I'm not talking about that. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about in the place of the business and the family is that, Christopher was, and people resent Christopher because they see him moving up quickly and stuff like that. And then now Christopher thinks that Tony B is sort of Tony's favorite and that he's chopped liver. And so when the two of them go up there together, he's not very friendly to him. They kind of resent, Christopher.
No, they make fun of Tony and they both bond over it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like that episode of Seinfeld where George and Elaine hang out together and it's awkward. And it isn't until they start making fun of Jerry that suddenly like everything's hilarious. And so it's like Christopher doesn't want to be there with Tony B. And Tony B is, I think maybe oblivious to that. And then it isn't until they start making fun of Tony S that they start bonding and laughing and really connecting.
Right.
And having a good time.
You're right.
But before that, I think Christopher is really not happy to be there and thinks that Tony B is the new favorite and stuff. So they start bonding. They have a good time together. And then Tony S comes up there and it totally changes the dynamic. And
by the way, it does. Wait. Before you, hold on. I'm putting a pin in that for 1 second because we get again, possibly one of my favorite lines in the entirety of The Sopranos thus far. As I do this rewatch, we get a line that, I'm someone. I consider myself a writer, and I consider myself. I'm always trying to improve my writing. I'm always trying to like learn and this, that, and that. The best way to learn is to watch and to listen. And I saw an example of just one of the finest pieces of like character writing ever. Tony B says something as they're driving by Sleepy Hollow, New York, right next to where we live in Westchester. And he says something. You okay there, pal?
Sorry, I had to communicate with someone IRL.
Oh. Okay, no worries. Tony P says something that's so just so indicative of who he is as a person and gives us such a deep understanding. We don't need a flashback. He tells an entire story with 2 sentences. He says, people used to call me Ichabod. No, fuck. What is it? People used to
call me Ichabod Crane.
Yeah, they used to call me Ichabod Crane. And then what does Christopher says something in response to that?
He said who?
He said I'm butchering it.
Very sorry people.
Some very sorry people. And we learned, they used to call me Ichabod Crane. Who? Some very sorry people. That's who. That's what it is. And it's so brilliant because it tells us everything we need to know about Tony B. We've gotten to know Tony B up to this point. And from just that line, we learned that he was made fun of as a kid. He's not someone who will tolerate being made fun of. And that he eventually, we see him shoot Joey Peeps. And eventually we see him, we learn that he is a vindictive guy. And it's fucking brilliant, dude. It's just a brilliant fucking line. I just wanted to highlight that.
And listen, we know about these social dynamics. It's like, people are friends, and when another person is there, then suddenly the other person gets bullied.
Oh, yes.
Because as soon as Tony's there, he starts making fun of Christopher's nose.
Just fucking
he starts saying he's annoying,
ragging on him.
Just drink whatever you want, just leave me alone or something.
Right, which deeply offends Christopher, who's sober. And he's saying Tony out of nowhere, so uncharacteristically says, why don't you just have a drink and relax, which confuses Christopher because this is the man that told him, if you fucking get loaded again, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to have you killed. And now he's telling me to drink just to relax. How am I supposed to relax? It's kicking up all this stuff inside of him that was there a long time ago from their dynamic when they were little kids, tied up against a tree and left there till 3 o'clock in the morning.
What?
He was tied up. He was tied up to a tree and left outside until 3:00 in the morning at Uncle Pat's when he was younger. Christopher.
Oh,
By Tony B and Tony. Yeah.
Really?
So yeah. So like we see that resentment. And then meanwhile, you know, do you want to talk about this real quick? Because you love this part about Janice and her anger management, and she has to go to anger management class. And I don't know, is there anything that you have to say about that?
Well, just, you know, Tony sees her getting better and is really proud of her at first.
Right.
At first, he doesn't understand it. Then he sees how well her and Bobby and the kids are getting along, and he is really proud of her and kind of warmed by it. And then in the end, he does the typical thing, and he doesn't like seeing people improve. Like he thinks he does. Like for instance, like with Irina, has that happened already? Is that a spoiler? Irina and Zellman.
Yeah, with Ronnie Zellman. Yeah,
That
already
he
happened.
sees her, and he's like happy that she's with someone who's better for her than he could have been.
She tried to unalive herself.
Yeah.
Don't use the S word. Can't use the S word on here.
Okay. And I don't even remember that part, but you know, he's happy for her and he's happy for Ron Zellman. And it's like he's warmed by it. But then Tony's just also kind of moody and does things sometimes for no reason other than
reason at all.
Other than to like get his rocks off.
Yeah.
And so
kind of,
it's, you know, I don't think it's that he's pretending to be warmed by the fact that you know, his sister is getting better and stuff, but like something happens. I don't know if there's an actual event in the episode that happens or if it's just he's upset about, you know, whatever it is. And he decides to undo any progress or to sort of show that her progress in the anger management thing is bullshit or whatever, or show that she's not capable of change. And he wants her to bug out and he wants to piss her off. And he knows that Harpo, who changed his name to Hal, incidentally, is a weak spot for her. And he just knows how to fucking push her buttons.
Just gets her hard.
You know, and she gets up and she screams and runs after him. And he walks out of there with a big fucking smile on his face.
He's so happy. It's a great episode. It really is. It's one of the best friggin' episodes of the Sopranos period. And by the way, the reason why, I don't know if we said, the reason why they were going up to the Uncle Pat's farm is because they had to move a couple bodies. And that's like a whole thing. Like, it's amazing how your connection to someone that you murder doesn't end when they're done being murdered.
Mm-hmm.
It's you have to look after their remains. And when if the land is going to get dug up, it's something that you need to go move. And they do this whole process where they have to smash the bones to like make them unrecognizable. Like, it's really like, it's like this whole process. And it's just amazing how you're tied to someone that you kill. It's not like you don't detach yourself from someone by murdering them. You are bonding them to you for the rest of your life, as long as their body still exists, which is kind of interesting when you think about it.
So,
you know?
And then you got, of course, listen, I'm going to have to probably sign off pretty soon.
Well, listen, we're at the end. Let's wrap this up. I'm saying we got to wrap this. We have to wrap this up.
Let's wrap this up.
Going too long. Hold on, real quick. Let me push through this super quick, and we'll get to the very end.
You want to talk about Matouche and the crazy horse and that whole thing with
why?
Yes,
we're going to talk about Abe. We'll talk about why.
I don't care about that. We know what happens.
We know what happens. Basically, hold on, real quick. Valentina, she gets burned really badly. Angelo finds out that Tony B finds out that Angelo was murdered by Phil and Billy Leotardo. That causes a retaliation where Tony B murders Billy, Phil's younger brother. So Phil's now out for revenge, and it's putting a strain on the whole family. Everybody is at risk for this reason. Tony B has to go at this point. There's no way around it.
In a way, like Tony S's soft spot for Tony B, or his over the top attempts, it basically set the stage for the conflict that like the end of series conflict. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I'm not going to get into any spoilers or whatever, but like this whole tension between New York and New Jersey isn't necessarily like Tony B is the catalyst for that. And Tony S could have stepped up and showed his friendship to the New York family to keep things. I mean, Phil still would have been a ball breaker and everything like that. And there would have been some tension, but Tony B really fucked things up for the relations of those two families.
Yeah.
And Phil never really gets over it. I mean, that's his brother. And
so bottom line, the only thing to happen at this point is Tony B cannot be made. Tony B needs to go. He's hiding out at the farm, which has been sold now, which is why they had to move the bodies in the first place.
Well, they make a deal. He has to give them away. I mean, he has to tell them. He has to tell them where he's at and let them kill. And
right.
Tony wants to do it himself because he'll give.
Right. Well, because they say they're going to torture him. They straight up say, if we can't get him, he's going to get tortured. Tony doesn't want Tony B to get tortured, so he knows he's got to take care of it himself.
Yeah, but that's not good enough for them. But Tony's like, you know what? Once I do it, it'll be too late. And so Tony
he's actually doing him a favor in a way because otherwise, if he doesn't eventually,
Tony's doing who a favor? Tony B?
Yeah, to an extent.
Yeah.
I mean, assuming that if Tony B gets caught, he's doing him a favor. If he doesn't get caught, then he murdered him. I mean, it's not really doing him a favor. In any case, this brings us to the very end where, there's this whole thing at the Crazy Horse where Adriana is basically put in a situation where she's put in a situation that's been going on this whole time. We never spoke about this. Super quick. Adriana has been treating the FBI like friends. You know what I mean? Like confidants.
Because she has no one, because they're the only people who know the truth about what she's going through.
Right. So she can actually vent to them. Yeah. It's a way of venting. So
that's not what they're there for. I mean,
of course not. But that's how she's compartmentalized it in her head. Right.
Yeah. Which is totally understandable.
Right. So she does that. She basically gets herself into a position where the FBI is putting the heat on. They basically can pin her for accessory to murder, which is far beyond anything that she had hanging over her head prior. She tries to convince Christopher to go into witness protection. Christopher makes a choice, and he betrays Adriana in the way that Adriana has also betrayed Christopher, but not in a way that deserves to be killed for.
Well, you'll see that conversation later. That's a spoiler. I'm sorry.
I don't know. Don't say anything about that. Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying, but I don't want to talk about that. Real super quick. Adriana goes driving with Silvio and she gets straight up murdered. And I remember this when I first watched it. I was in disbelief that Adriana was killed. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that Silvio was the guy to do it. And it definitely changes the way you watch the show, because now that Adriana is going to die because of Silvio, and that Tony's going to kill Chris. So it's like, it's like you're watching knowing who's going to be the end of who. And it's so weird. They're on this drive. And here's the thing about mob guys. If they're beating the shit out of you and they're roughing you up and they're in your face aggro, they're not trying to kill you. They're trying to get you to do what they want. If they're super nice to you and super subtle, they're looking to kill you because they never want you to see. You will never see it when you're going to die with these mob guys. It's only when if they're really mad with
such a great scene. He's pulling off into the woods and she knows what's happening.
She knows, and she envisions that she had driven away. She had her suitcase, and that wasn't what she chose to do. It's super sad. Adriana did not deserve that. And Tony, what's amazing is Tony becomes so reptilian. This is going to be his friggin' like daughter-in-law. And like now she's like, she has to go. The moment you turn rat is the end of you. The final episode is, what happens in the final episode? Is that when Tony B dies, or is it? Yeah, that's when he kills him, right? In the final episode.
I think him and
yes, that's the final episode.
Him and he kills him, but then don't him and Johnny Sack like make up? Him and Johnny Sack.
No, Johnny tells Tony, "Hey, look, I'm the boss now," and that
wasn't good enough. that wasn't good enough.
He says it didn't solve a thing. It didn't solve a thing.
But they meet up at his house. They meet up at Johnny Sack's house.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. And that's when Johnny gets pinched because of
Johnny gets pinched. Tony throws the gun into the
woods,
into the snow in the woods. And one of these great musical moments in The Sopranos with Glad Tidings playing from Van Morrison.
Yep.
And and then he comes home, right? Are they back together at this point? Him and Carm?
They're back together. Christopher disposes of Adriana's like suitcase luggage.
Yeah, he brings it to the airport.
Cold. It's so fucking cold, dude. It's so sad. He loved her and he's fucked up over it. It wasn't so cut and dry for Chris. For Tony, it was pretty easy. Although they do say, hey, we never really spoke about this. And they kind of like they're still kind of reeling. They're reeling about it. Junior's dementia's kicking up. And, Tony finds out that Paulie had the Pio-Mai painting and he takes it away and he finds out about, he's like, why the fuck am I dressed like?
Some great memes about that painting. Like,
I'm trying to think of what else happens. I mean, basically Johnny Sack going away, and Johnny Sack will never get out of prison. That's it for him. He's kind of like a Gotti-esque sort of character in a way.
Yeah. I want you to let me know when you watch The Ride.
What? The Ride?
The Ride. It's an episode in season 6-1.
So, question, are you going to join me? You have to join me for season 6.
I'd love to, yeah.
But we won't be able to do it probably until late July because I have to.
That's fine.
Okay, so real quick, let's do our question now. Trivia question, everybody. If you are here, go to FrumessMAIL@gmail.com to answer this question. I'm going to give you the rules one more time in my little. I'm going to be doing a live show every single day. I'm going to be giving away a t-shirt. At the end of every episode, I will ask my trivia question. You will send your answer to FrumessMAIL@gmail.com, and the first person to answer correctly will be the winner. You give me your name, your address, and your t-shirt size. If you are outside of the continental United States, you will have to cover shipping and handling. Join us night after night where I will be doing t-shirt giveaways. Who doesn't like a free t-shirt? I'm not going to go easy on any of you. I'm going to ask really hard questions. So be prepared. Okay. Here is my question. My question. It's going to be Sopranos related. Okay. You got to send this to the email. Do not put it in the chat. Don't answer it here. Don't leave it in the comments. Send it to the email if you want to win.
Don't do it.
If you've already sent me an email, well, you might not be eligible to win if you've already answered a question and won a shirt. I have to catch up. I got like a whole bunch of responses to respond to. The question is, Vito takes on a lover in season 6, and he makes this type of breakfast food that is nicknamed what? That's the question. So what is the nickname of the breakfast food that Vito's lover from season 6 makes for Vito, as well as just whatever in general?
I thought you weren't going to go easy. I thought you weren't going to go easy on them.
Well, for anyone who's the casual, I guess that was pretty casual. I guess that was pretty easy if you're a Sopranos fan. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you're right, maybe wrong. Anyway, I want to thank Jeremy so much for coming on. And,
actually, it's pronounced Jeremiel.
Yeah, sorry, Jeremiel, aka Spicy Walnuts. He'll be back for when we do season 6. We'll do that probably in later July. Stay tuned. We got more shows coming up this week. I got a show tomorrow, probably a show on. I got a very special Misfits.
Is this going to be on YouTube? On
Tuesday. Yeah, it already is on YouTube. It's on YouTube right now. It'll be on Spotify.
Wonderful.
It's on every podcasting platform, as well as Facebook Live.
Wait, this is on Spotify?
This will be on Spotify. It'll be also on Spotify video.
This is my debut.
This is your debut on Spotify. So we say peace, hair grease. We'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Jeremy, hold on one second.